think that was fantastic. Brutal feedback. Terrifying. I think that was fantastic. I was being interviewed at the moment. Before I welcome Dr Lizzy to the stage, she's probably got some things to do. Can anyone tell me what their key takeaway from hearing Simon speak would be? Anyone care to volunteer a key learning or thought or takeaway?
Probably just learn new skills. So to help go out and learn new skills help him.
And the knock-on effect of those could be, just by learning new skills, you change the world. Any other key thoughts? Yes?
I say the solutions are already there, it's just the will of the people to put them into action.
Amazing, and that ties in so well to what Jill was saying, that it's just a choice. We can literally do anything we want. You know, the Americans, depending on whether you believe it or not, and I do believe it, put a man on the moon in a very short period of time just because they decided to do it fundamentally. So we can solve any problem. Any other key takeaways from that?
It was good to hear people of influence who agree with what I think.
Amazing.
And that's not me with an ego, I'm just sitting there going, yeah, I agree.
Are we often more aligned than not? When we find that, isn't that an interesting thing? We think we're so oppositional, but actually... well, that was a treat, but we now have a really, really great treat.
Wait till it's over.
Yeah. I'm not trying to write checks here that I don't think we're going to cash. I think we're going to be fine. I have met Dr Lizzy and spoken to her a few times. As soon as I started speaking to her, her soul captivated me. The official title of her talk is Building Resilience for Whatever the Future Throws. An absolutely brilliant thing is about to happen. No pressure. Dr Lizzy, over to you.
Great, thank you. And welcome to those on Zoom as well. So interestingly, we just talk about choice because I'm going to talk a lot about choice and the choices that we make. So before we start, I just want you to stand up. I know we do lots of sitting and standing, but we need to do this to keep the energy up after lunch. And I just want to give yourself a big clap. And now you can sit down calmly. Because I'm going to be talking about who we need to be resilient and confident. Now, we've had the most extraordinary 2 years, nearly 2.5 now. And that just demonstrates the fact you're all here on Zoom in this room here, how resilient you are. So that is number one tip. We are far more resilient than we ever imagined. If we'd said 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we would have to deal with what we've had to deal with, we would have probably said, hands up, surrender, no way. And we're here. So that is my first message to you. You are amazing. So, I talk about resilience and confidence, and I've created this confidence because I think it combines both, because you have to be confident to be resilient, and you've got to be resilient to be confident. So what I'm going to do now is go through my C's of what I think you need to have in order to be confident. And you have to remember to put the IL in, because I missed it when I first did the presentation. So in order to be awesome, I'm all about owning our awesomeness. So part of that, we need to have a bit of an understanding what stress is, because we hear so much about I'm stressed, life's stressful. Stress is when we feel we've got to deal with more stuff than we feel we've got capacity for. The thing about that is, it's just a story that we're making up in our heads. And as Andrew said earlier about being safe and hierarchy of needs, we are safe. Unless we're under gunfire, which I have had that sort of experience. And even then you're safe, because I thought, right, that's it. I'm going, goodbye, farewell. And I didn't, so it was okay. So actually, the irony of it, just another little tip, while I'm going slightly off piste here, when I've been in situations when I really thought, this is it, just to reassure you, I had a real sense of calmness, because it was inevitable. So that's how it's going to be. And then it was all right. So there you go, that's it. So yes, so resilience is part of something that we have. So confidence, for those of you who need to have an understanding what confidence is, and we've already talked about trust just now, actually, it was interesting. Confidence is to do with trust. It's to do with trusting ourselves, trusting someone else, or trusting a thing. So if you think about, I'm confident they all turn up, will you trust that they're going to turn up? I'm confident that I won't fall off the stage, because hopefully I won't. And so it's all to do with trust. Whereas resilience is all to do with our ability to cope with whatever hits us. Now we all talk about, you hear so much about bouncing back. I always talk about bouncing forward, because we're never the same person as we were before that event or that situation or whatever happened. So just think how much you've bounced forward over the last 2.5 years. And as part of that, there's 3 phases that we go through. We go through a resistance phase and a recovery phase and a reconfigure phase. And I just love Serene this morning on Uncover, Discover, Recover. So I might have to market that as well for her, because that's exactly what it is. Because to start with, we resist it. This can't be happening. How many of us, like if you're like me, at the beginning of COVID, in the first lockdown, you sort of thought, I feel I'm in a film set. This can't be happening. It's just, this can't be happening. It'll be over in a couple of weeks, over by Easter, a bit like the First or Second World War, over by Christmas, and it wasn't. And then you go through a phase of, well, okay, better get on with it, best deal with it. And that is when the kind of recovery starts, because you think, well, just keep going, just hope for the best. And then you go through a reconfigure where you sort of become that new norm. What's interesting at the moment, and we are in a really concerning phase, shall I say, because, and I know from deployment, for this has just felt like, for me, and anybody that's ex-military or military, it's felt like a really long deployment where you don't know where the enemy is, you don't know where it's going to hit, you don't know how long it's going to last, and you just keep going on that hamster wheel. What happens when that hamster wheel stops or things go back a bit to whatever normal is? We suddenly think, whoa, what's all that about? And that is the phase we're in right now. So this is when, this is where we're hearing so much about mental health, mental illness, stress, all sorts of awful stories that are coming up. And this is because we're now in that, what I would call the post-deployment phase, where we're trying to work it all out. Anyway, there are reasons and we can do stuff about it. So I'm going to talk a little bit to start with about the doing. What do we need to do to be a great collaborator? And actually, we've had some incredible stuff this morning, and we're certainly with Ben's how we want the world to be. So what we're going to do and who we're going to be to do it, because we can't just plan it, as we've already said, and say, yes, I've got this tick list, and I'm going to do this tick list, and I've got to do this, and this is why our business leaders don't listen to this. I do not do goals, because we need to be who we're going to be, not what we're going to do. So if we are being the best version of us, the goals just happen. We just do it. It just happens. So the first one is culture, and we don't need to talk about this because we've actually had the most guru guy here who's talked about it. But it's actually, if you're thinking of a collaboration, it's not just the bigger culture, it's what is the culture within your collaboration. And what climate? Now I always talk about oak trees and palm trees, because in resilience, are you an oak tree or a palm tree? Now, you don't have to answer that, because we are running out of time already, because we started a bit late. So basically, an oak tree is strong, it's firm, 300-year-old roots, really deep, and hopefully stands for 300 years, unless you have a really strong wind. And those of a certain age in 1987 know they just got ripped up, and 7 oaks became 1 oak, because all the oak trees just get pulled out. And a palm tree is amazing because it just bounces back. It has short roots, but it's in the, the tropics and the gorgeous weather, but hurricanes or tornadoes, it just bounces back. So to be truly resilient, you need to have a bit of a match. And when you're doing collaboration, you need a clear vision, what you want to achieve, where you're going to go. And as part of that, what you want to create. And this is what we've already talked about this morning, about thinking small and getting bigger and bigger. There's no point in saying, I want to change the world. Yes, we all want to change the world, but what's one step you need to do to get that seed planted? Be more pirate. As we keep saying, be more pirate. So that little seed then grows into that oak tree. And you need some direction. You need a compass. Now the compass isn't always, I've got this big purpose, this is what I want to do. The compass could be your who's. Who are in your collaboration, or who are you working with to keep you on the right way, going true north or whatever way you want to go. So who are your who's? And what is the course that you want to go? So the bigger vision, and then the path that you want to take. And of course, connection and collaboration, that's a given. So, and what challenges are you going to face on the way to do that? What hurdles are you going to have to jump up? The more we prepare for what things might go wrong, the more we can put things into place to mitigate it so it doesn't actually happen. And circles. Sometimes we feel we're going in circles. And long as we often think, how far have we come? Because then we realise actually we're actually not going in circles. We're actually moving forward. And the other thing about circles, how many times do we reinvent the wheel? And don't think that actually we're not, and as Jill was saying about copywriting and stuff, how many times you think you've created something amazing and somebody's done it, or you think, I'm going to start from scratch because it's a new collaboration, let's start from the beginning. Why not build on something different? And when I was doing my research, the whole thing about doing a PhD is got to be new knowledge. Yes, new knowledge as in could be taking something different forward or taking something at a different view of something. It doesn't have to be a blank sheet of paper. So we waste so much time reinventing things that we don't need to reinvent because they work really well. So let's build on that. And communicate. Now, in Afghanistan, when I was in Afghanistan, or any military operation we've done, communication, it just highlighted to me, communication doesn't need to be speaking. Now, in a serious resuscitation situation, we've got about 25 people around the table, with one casualty in the middle who's severely injured, that's life literally seconds before they're going to die. Everybody in that team knows exactly their role. No one speaks to anyone else. There's one person that will tell the history once that's come from their crew to say, this guy has done A, B and C. You listen once, if you've missed it, you've missed it, and everybody else knows exactly their role. And if you watch Formula One changing the wheel, it is extraordinary as well. Exactly the same principle. That no one asks what anybody else is doing. They know my little bit. And this is all about collaboration. We don't have to be doing everything within collaboration. We build on our genius. We do our genius, you do your genius. And collectively, we can make a massive difference. And what the change, we're always going to have change. Leaves change in the winter and the summer and whatever. Whatever happens, that happens. We need to be aware of that when we're collaborating and when we have any project. Because if we are prepared, we are more likely to be able to deal with it. And actually this going with the flow, which I'll talk about in a little while. And calculate the risks. Calculate what's going to go well, what's not going to go well. So I'm now going to talk about a bit of who we need to be, which is, for me, is my absolute passion. So we want to be that white poppy in a red field. We want to be a poppy because actually that's where we work together, but also be that person, that standing tall poppy. So if I don't know if anybody's heard of tall poppy syndrome. Tall poppy syndrome is when you stand tall and other people try and slash you down because they don't think you're threatening them. So the only way they can deal with that is to wipe you out. And this is where toxicity in the workplace comes in, which is what I'm passionate about, or getting rid of it, not, you know. Yes, so and that tall poppy syndrome is where you get slashed down because other people see in you what you can't see in yourself and they find it threatening. So we need to be that tall poppy. Now whether you're a red poppy or a white poppy, the most important thing is you're standing tall, and once you stand tall, you allow everyone else to stand tall with you. And contribution. Ants are a wonderful ability to actually, if you watch ants working together, it is extraordinary. And I don't know how many times their body weight they can carry. 7, thank you. I meant to look it up this morning, but I forgot. Yeah, so it is extraordinary.
Wasn't strong enough.
So we need to be more ant as well as more pirate.
Pyrant.
Yes.
Pirates of Penzance.
Pyrant. Yeah, pyrant. There you go.
Pirates of Penzance.
And be creative. And now, you know, I talk about there is no box. You hear, I hate these sentences like, oh, you need to be think outside the box. It's blue sky thinking. No one has any idea what that means. But there is no box. So just what can you create that's beyond your imagination? And this is where obviously the exercise we did with Ben this morning was awesome. We had all sorts of wild ideas. What can we do to make that happen? And choice is one thing I'm going to really go into a little bit now. Now, we've all just mentioned about choice. We always have a choice. Even if we feel we have no choice, we have a choice. Now I can only explain a little story here from where, two stories I can use to explain this. Our daughter's 20. We had 6 years of IVF for her, and I was desperate to have another child. And my husband just couldn't do it again. He said, I've done 6 years of this, we've got a beautiful daughter, I just can't go through this whole process again. Now at the time I find that quite traumatic. However, you know, I had talked to someone like you do, and she said, you've got a choice. And I said, I haven't got a choice. He says no, so I have no choice. And she said to me, well, you can always leave him and have a baby with someone else. I thought, that's not a choice. She said, that's a choice. But I love him, I couldn't leave him. And that was the first time I realised that we have a choice, but often we don't think we have a choice. So I just want you to have a think, actually, what choices, what events have happened in your life where you felt you had no choice, but actually you did have a choice. So just write that down for the moment. We'll come back to that because obviously I'm conscious of tea breaks and all that stuff. So have a think. And the other time I thought about a choice was when I went to Afghanistan, and I stepped off the tarmac to go to Afghanistan. At the time I didn't know if I was going to come back. I'd said goodbye to my daughter, and I remember standing on the tarmac thinking, am I a very irresponsible mother that I'm leaving my daughter behind? But at that point I felt I had no choice, because I would never, how could I ever, as leader of a team, I had a big job to do in Afghanistan, supporting all healthcare for all the personnel out in Afghanistan, and I had a big team to support. So what sort of leader would I have been if I put my family before them? So I never saw it as a choice, but looking back on it, I had a choice. So often, when we're in the most extreme circumstances, we feel there is no choice. How many times over COVID have you had to pivot your business, or you've had to do something different, and you felt you had no choice? You did. You could have just laid in the garden and hand up and say, I surrender. So we always have a choice. And we've all talked a lot about core values today. And I talk about integrity and morality as a fundamental. Integrity is not just, I'm not going to kill someone, or I'm going to do something really bad. Integrity is like a bike wheel. A bike wheel, if it's in integrity, it just flows round. It doesn't go clunky. If you get a dent in that bike wheel, it just clonks and clonks and clonks. So that to me is what integrity is. You're living and you're breathing as the best version of you, and when you're not the best version of you, that's okay too, because you're honest about it. So if you muck up something, it's not mucking up, it's just saying, sorry, hands up, I didn't do that well. So knowing what your core values are, and this is where we have a real clash in teams and things, where people's core values are very different. So that's another exercise to do another time, to actually, so you identify your core values. It's a very 5-minute exercise, as Serene was talking about, very quick to do. And as part of that, curiosity, is that one of your values? And curious, never judgment, criticism or comparison, because to compare is to despair. So if you compare yourself to someone else, never compare your chapter 1 with somebody else's chapter 20, or your internal dialogue with someone's external dialogue. So, and courage to me is, it's one of my fundamentals. And not what I think about courage. Courage to me is when you have no guarantee of the outcome. So it doesn't mean you've got to go to Afghanistan or something really huge. It could be just walking along the street and saying hi to someone when you're not sure what the answer's going to be. Or ringing up someone that you don't know how they are. Or doing something. Collaboration, you have to have courage within collaboration, because we don't know what the outcome's going to be. And interestingly, you can never be courageous. You might do an act that afterwards appears courageous. No one sets out to be courageous. I saw soldiers going out on patrol every single day, 1 in 6 of them that was not going to come back at the end of that day, and yet they went out every day, because in their heads they were always going to be the 5 that would come back, and it was never going to be them. That to me is courage. So what courage can we show in our collaboration? And we need that sense of calm as well. We need Alexandra with us at all times, to be there in our heads if he's not physically here, to do that grounding. And as part of that is being centred. Now as part of that being centred, we might throw a bullseye, it goes off, it goes in the wrong place. That's okay too. There's no such thing as failure. Failure is purely feedback. It just tells us it didn't quite work this way. So ban failure from our language, because it doesn't exist. It's purely a conversation in our heads. And as part of that, being compassionate. And I wrote it like that because we have to be passionate to be compassionate. We've got to really care. And naturally we care. We can't choose compassion. We actually have it within us as maybe one of our values. And I talk about sense of control. Control what we can control and let go of what we can't. And how many times do we try and stay in control? And this is why surfing is a really good example. If you watch surfers, they go with the waves. They don't try and go straight into the shore and let the waves go aside because they're determined to get the wave going the right way. They just surf. So how can we be more surfers rather than controlling? And so we can only control ourselves. We can't control other people. We can't control what they say, how they behave. We can control how we react to it. And no one can make you feel anything. I hear that so often. He made me feel like this. No, he did not. You can only feel the way you feel. No one can make you feel anything. You have a choice. You have a choice how you feel, you have a choice how you think, you have a choice whether you want to catch those feelings and those thoughts and change it to something that empowers you more. And be conscious. And also, what legacy are you creating? Are you the ripple in the pond? Now, I guarantee all of you are creating a legacy, and you might not even realise the legacy you were creating. When I was in the army, I thought it was totally wrong for nurses not to do PhDs. I was somebody told at school, you go to university, you're not intelligent enough for university, so just be a nurse. But I love nursing, absolutely loved it, so it was the right decision for me. And then I got the opportunity to do a degree, and I did that, and then I got the opportunity to do a master's, and I did that, and I thought, and I got an opportunity from the university to do a PhD, and I put up a course to say, nurses should do PhDs, this is wrong! And by the way, if you're going to fund it, can it be me? And I had so many hurdles in the way. But what I didn't realise when I was doing that, and then I got nurses funded every year to do a PhD after I'd done mine. And so sometimes we don't know what legacy we're creating. And we all have those trolleys where we have the wonky wheel, don't we? But actually, a trolley, it's the same. They just have difficulties. Some work, some don't work. Oh, 15 minutes, I've got ages. I was trying to catch up to time for 10 to. Okay. So it's choosing your trolley and notice if it's got a wonky wheel. And if it has got a wonky wheel, do you throw it away or do you start again? Or what do you do? So that's another choice you can make. Actually, start off with a plan. And be that dog with a bone. Be that one that no matter what happens, you are going to do it. Be determined. And I wanted to think of a C for determined, but I couldn't think of it, so I'm going to say determined anyway. And the hurdles. Be with conviction. If anybody gives you a hurdle, just jump higher. For me, every challenge is a learning opportunity. There is no such thing that we can't learn something from. And if we know and trust that everything is happening to us for a reason, even at the time we don't think this could possibly have something beneficial, then we can actually make things better. And for example, COVID, I don't underestimate how traumatic and horrendous the last few months and years have been. However, look at us now. We've got Zoom up there, hi to people on Zoom. We've got the room here. We are speaking globally. Before it was like the local golf club for a workshop. And now, there's no limits to who we can communicate with, who we can collaborate with. Never mind the impact, how much better we are with the environment, because we don't spend all day on a train going for an hour meeting and it's wasted the day and huge travel and blah, 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 blah. And flying for a conference for a 20-minute presentation. But remember those days? Round the world for a conference. I do miss it though. However, sustainability, crazy. And so, what are you going to celebrate? Because it's so important that we look forward, but we also, as I said earlier, look back to see what can we celebrate. Because that gives us the momentum to keep going when things are tough. So now we've got a few more minutes. I would like you to write down and by all means talk about it on your table. Number 1, what have you learned? Number 2, what have you done or what are you going to do that took courage, and what are you going to do now to actually use the courage that you naturally have within you? And the other question is, what choices are you now going to make that actually before this you might not have thought of was a choice? So related to courage and related to choice. Because everything we do in life is related to those two, even though we might not realise it. So whether you want to just have a few minutes just thinking about it for yourself and then discussing it with your tables.
What's on the table? Well, let's get up front.
So I'm talking about what courage you've had in the past you didn't really realise was courage, and how you're going to use that to take life forward in part of this collaboration. And what choices in the past did you not see was a choice that was a choice? And what choices can you make about the future, and how you're going to make a difference?
It'll be a nice picture, Karen. Just made you giggle.
Bernthal took it the challenge. When I was 20, multiple years before we actually manifested and made that happen. And a lot of effort.
I mean, we can say, oh, nothing's happened, but maybe I decided yesterday I was going to tell you. I've met for a lot of people, they go, nothing happened.
Why would we do that? Very aware of personnel. But key to see the paperwork you had to complete. I did have a choice. To see the work, but it's so just and that sort of stuff going on. So work situations took several years to win.
And if you're on Zoom, you do it together, or you can just do it as a big room, or you can just do it
Part is sticking with your vision.
I was just not
In the
even
long
looking
term,
at the choice
it's
because
okay to have the courage to create the vision.
desire
Give up
was
the
to make sure well,
pursuit. You don't have courage.
can't see through.
You can't see it through.
So had I thought
Courage
about
to
it,
see
I
it
would
through,
have
isn't it?
resisted it. So it's just easy not to think about it.
I think also as employees,
Because
we don't
there
want
will
I know that goes
be
back to that.
causes
The Wright brothers and whatever
that
his name
irritating like the old school concepts of society which give you ultimate. If you don't make a decision, you're accepting the status quo.
Just don't make a decision, eh?
Hard pill.
Yes, but very courageous.
Yes. And encourage, I meant to say that actually, that encourage is obviously when you're enabling others to be courageous.
But we're talking about the courage to stick with something, and so Mike's talking about having a vision to do something, and maybe it takes a very long time.
Sometimes it's either choice to feel right, but you don't like you're blinkered to.
Yeah, sustainability, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
It's sustainability.
I was thinking, one of the C, but so many of them, commit, you know,
Yes.
when we commit.
I keep thinking of more.
Then it's like the universe says, okay, here's the help. You know? But it's,
Yes, fun. I know exactly. There's so many. So many. Yeah. I was just really because I was thinking I couldn't think of fun and with yes, but it's a bit of craziness. Yes, that's what I was thinking. Thank you. Take them back.
One of them. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was like, but I can that was never even.
I use that in terms of the hurdles when you just like determination.
That's one of yours.
Commitment and craziness.
But one thing that did just come to mind, Jill was talking just mentioned about commitment, and it is about that point, isn't it, that not giving up for something, because it doesn't look like the vision that we have in our mind. And I can think of situations where you think, right, I'm going to do this, like for example business. We start, we've got in our mind how we think it's going to be, or how like everyone tells us it's going to be. And it's that point, isn't it, where you sort of could give up, or when most people think, well, that's not working.
Let's come back into the room, and we've taught of two other C's, so thanks Andrew and Jane. Craziness and commitment. How could I miss that? So anyway, thank you so much. So, what thoughts have you had on your table?
I think it's about knowing sometimes the right decision for you in the core, but understanding that sometimes the decisions that you will make, and it is a choice, will impact others. And is the risk enough to make that choice or not? So the choice is sometimes multi-layered. You can know what the core choice might be for me, but it will impact on others in a way that you know is going to harm them. So sometimes the choice isn't simple, but it's still a choice, which I accept. But sometimes it can be multi-layered.
So what do you mean by harming someone?
If someone's got a particular idea or a particular way of looking at something.
Yeah, I was going to say, like the example that you gave about your daughter.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's hard to say. You can't always definitively say if something will harm someone because it's very much about their reaction to it. But you know, you might feel that being absent for a long time was harmful, but you also felt it was harmful to leave your team. So you
Yes, exactly.
Both those decisions impacted other people because you're interconnected.
And just as a reassurance, she always still talks about it. Was so proud of you, Mummy, when you went to Afghanistan. So I just want, but it's exactly that. I just wanted you to clarify what you mean by harm, because obviously we never intend to do harm. However, sometimes there is a fallout from making a choice. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. Thank you.
Consequences.
Well, you see, this is going to be like a pub quiz now, isn't it?
You just want to fill up your...
Yeah.
We'll get Karma Chameleon on this side.
Yeah. Anyway, so the middle table. What did you think on the middle table? What did you come to discuss on your table?
On our table, do you want to talk about your being
well, one of the Gary's ones was when you make a decision to do something that takes a period of time to actually make it a reality. So we moved overseas for a number of years and we're planning to build that and make it happen. And there were certain people who saw that as a negative because they were envious or jealous or whatever else. But they didn't see the workload that got put in to make it happen. So the actual tenacity, focus, resilience, all the other words we can talk about to bring it about. So that makes it very powerful.
Thank you. And what we talk about in courage is actually giving other people the courage, supporting others to have the courage. And actually what you made a really good point, Mike, when I talked about, don't compare your chapter 20, your chapter 1, chapter 20. What we never see people's backstories. We only see, Michael McIntyre fills out a Wembley. We don't see when he turned up in an event in a pub for 2 people and everybody got booed off the stage. I'm not saying that happened to him, but that whole story, you never hear about that bit. So Alan at the back.
So coming from the basis of trying to think where we might have had those choices or not have those choices, it's so subtle that we don't even think about it. So in a work situation, for example, you just do what the boss says because that's the norm. So it wouldn't even think about there not being a choice. It was so subtle that you just did it.
Exactly. So we do stuff, don't we? We don't even think it's a choice. And it is a choice.
And then also from that, we were thinking about how to move things forward. And behind that lack of choice, for me it would be a case of if I did challenge it, I was a people pleaser, so I would do what they want to be happy.
Which is want to be part of the tribe, the belonging versus the
Exactly.
fitting in. And just a final tip before we finish, fitting in is the opposite of belonging.
Yes.
You can only belong to yourself. If you fit in, you are that chameleon, wanted to be with other people and wanted to fit in that like they want you to be, and you betray yourself in the process.
Really quickly, if you head towards your fear, then your biggest success will be behind it.
Yeah, thank you. So, love to continue the conversation. Any more C's, please give them to me because I'm just building up my C's.
Crabs.
that takes the courage to admit it, doesn't it, really? Anyway, thank you so much. It's just such a joy to be here with you and here to have another conversation anytime.
Great. Everybody clap.